A 7-year-old girl plays in the fresh December snow outside her home, laughing with her best friend on what should have been just another winter evening in small-town Illinois. A stranger approaches, calls himself Johnnie, and offers her a piggyback ride. When her friend runs inside for mittens and returns just minutes later, both Maria and the mysterious Johnnie have vanished into the night. It's December 3rd, 1957, and this disappearance will haunt a community for over half a century. This case was so significant that FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover personally requested regular updates. The investigation would span generations, outliving most of the original detectives, witnesses, and even family members. But sometimes justice moves slowly, and sometimes it takes a mother's deathbed confession, a sister's courage, and a single photograph to finally catch a killer. Before we dive into this case, make sure to like this video and subscribe. This is a story that will stay with you long after it ends. What you're about to hear is the remarkable story of how the longest cold case conviction in U.S. history was finally achieved, proving that no matter how much time passes, the truth has a way of surfacing. Sycamore, Illinois, in 1957, was the kind of place where children played outside until dark and neighbors knew each other's names. It was a community where parents felt safe letting their kids build snowmen in the front yard, and where the most exciting thing that happened was usually the Friday night high school football game. That sense of security was shattered forever on the evening of December 3rd. 7-year-old Maria Ridulph was everything you'd expect from a child her age, full of energy, curious about the world, and completely trusting of the adults around her. She lived on Archie Place with her loving family, and like most children in the neighborhood, she spent her free time playing with friends, especially her best friend Kathy Sigmund, who lived nearby. On that fateful December evening, Maria and 8-year-old Kathy were making the most of the fresh snowfall, playing in front of Maria's house as darkness began to settle over their quiet street. The girls were bundled up against the cold, their breath visible in the frigid air as they laughed and played in the snow that had transformed their familiar neighborhood into a winter wonderland. Around 7 p.m., their innocent play was interrupted by the arrival of a stranger, a young man who appeared to be in his late teens or early 20s. He was friendly and approachable, introducing himself as Johnnie to the two girls. There was nothing immediately threatening about him. He seemed like just another neighborhood kid, perhaps a bit older than the boys they usually played with. Johnnie struck up a conversation with the girls, showing interest in their snow games. Then he made an offer that would change everything. He asked Maria if she'd like a piggyback ride. For a 7-year-old, this seemed like harmless fun, an exciting offer from what appeared to be a friendly older kid. Kathy, feeling the bite of the December cold on her hands, realized she had forgotten her mittens. She told Maria she was going to run home quickly to get them, a trip that would take only a few minutes. Maria stayed behind with Johnnie, probably excited about the promised piggyback ride. When Kathy returned from her house, mittens in hand and ready to rejoin the fun, she found the street empty. Maria was gone. Johnnie was gone. The only evidence of their presence was the disturbed snow where they had been standing just moments before. Kathy immediately ran to Maria's house to alert her family. The response was swift and desperate. Maria's parents immediately began searching the neighborhood, calling her name into the cold December night. Neighbors joined the search, checking backyards, garages, and any place a child might hide or be hidden. Within hours, the Sycamore Police Department was involved, and by the next morning the search had expanded to include state authorities. The FBI was notified, and Director J. Edgar Hoover himself took a personal interest in the case, demanding regular updates on the investigation's progress. But despite the massive search effort, despite the involvement of multiple law enforcement agencies, and despite the entire community's desperate hope, Maria Ridulph had simply vanished without a trace. The disappearance of Maria Ridulph sent shockwaves through Sycamore and beyond. This wasn't just a local tragedy. It was the kind of case that captured national attention and demonstrated how a single moment could destroy the innocence of an entire community. The initial investigation was comprehensive and urgent. Police immediately focused on gathering every detail about the mysterious Johnnie. Kathy Sigmund, as the only witness to Maria's abduction, became crucial to the investigation. Despite being only 8 years old, she provided remarkably detailed descriptions of the stranger. She described him as a young man, probably in his late teens, with a friendly demeanor that had put both girls at ease. Law enforcement officers canvassed the entire neighborhood, interviewing residents and asking if anyone had seen the stranger or noticed anything unusual that evening. They checked with local schools, youth organizations, and anywhere a young man matching Johnnie's description might be found. The investigation expanded to include surrounding communities as police considered the possibility that the abductor wasn't local to Sycamore. The FBI's involvement brought additional resources and expertise to the case. Agents worked alongside local detectives, following up on hundreds of tips that poured in from across the region. Every lead was investigated, every potential suspect questioned, but none provided the breakthrough investigators desperately needed. As days turned into weeks, the search for Maria intensified. Volunteers organized search parties that combed through wooded areas, abandoned buildings, and rural properties surrounding Sycamore. The community rallied together in a way that only small towns can, with businesses closing so employees could join search efforts and families bringing food to sustain the searchers. The case generated significant media coverage, with Maria's photograph appearing in newspapers across the Midwest. Radio stations broadcast descriptions of both Maria and her suspected abductor. The story reached a national audience and tips came in from multiple states, each one followed up by investigators who refused to give up hope. Winter made the search particularly challenging. The harsh Illinois weather limited the areas that could be effectively searched, and investigators feared that evidence might be buried under snow or compromised by the elements. Every day that passed without finding Maria made the outcome seem increasingly grim. Despite the massive effort, the initial investigation failed to identify Johnnie or locate Maria. Several suspects were questioned and released when their alibis checked out. The case began to consume enormous resources, but law enforcement remained committed to finding answers. As Christmas approached, just 3 weeks after Maria's disappearance, the community held vigils and prayer services, clinging to hope while facing the growing reality that Maria might not be coming home. The investigation continued through the holidays and into the new year, but leads were becoming scarce, and the trail was growing cold. The end of Maria's story came on April the 26th, 1958, nearly 5 months after her disappearance. A farmer and his wife were walking through a wooded area about 120 miles from Sycamore when they made the devastating discovery that would confirm everyone's worst fears. Under a tree, partially hidden by debris and the remnants of winter, they found the small body of Maria Ridulph. The discovery brought both closure and renewed determination to the investigation. Maria's remains were carefully recovered and examined, but the advanced state of decomposition and the time that had elapsed made determining the exact cause of death difficult. What was clear, however, was that this was undoubtedly a homicide, and Johnnie had transformed from a kidnapper into a murderer. The location where Maria was found became a crucial piece of evidence. Investigators studied the site carefully, looking for any clues that might lead them to her killer. The remote location suggested that whoever was responsible had knowledge of the area and had deliberately chosen this spot to conceal the crime. Despite the discovery of Maria's body, the investigation into her murder continued for months but eventually stalled. The identity of Johnnie remained a mystery. Several suspects were investigated and eliminated, but no solid leads materialized. The case that had captivated the nation and demanded regular updates to FBI Director Hoover slowly faded from headlines and eventually went cold. For decades, Maria's murder remained unsolved, becoming one of those cases that haunted the detectives who had worked on it and the community that had been forever changed by her death. The case files gathered dust, periodically reviewed by new investigators who hoped fresh eyes might spot something their predecessors had missed, but the breakthrough never came. Then, in 2008, more than 50 years after Maria's death, something extraordinary happened. Janet Tessier, a woman living in the Pacific Northwest, contacted the DeKalb County Sheriff's Office with information that would reopen one of Illinois' most famous cold cases. Janet told investigators about a conversation that had haunted her for 14 years. In 1994, she claimed, her mother had made a deathbed confession. As she lay dying, Janet's mother had allegedly admitted that her son, Janet's half-brother, was responsible for Maria Ridulph's murder. The confession wasn't direct, but Janet and her sister, Mary Pat, who was also present, both interpreted their mother's words as an admission of their brother's guilt. The brother Janet was referring to was John Tessier, who by 2008 had changed his name to Jack Daniel McCullough and was living in Seattle. In 1957, at the time of Maria's murder, John Tessier would have been 18 years old, exactly matching the age range witnesses had described for Johnnie. This revelation prompted investigators to take a completely fresh look at the case. They began examining old evidence with new technology and started tracking down witnesses who were still alive more than 5 decades later. The most crucial witness was Kathy Sigmund, now Kathy Chapman, the friend who had been with Maria on that December evening and had seen Johnnie face to face. The reopened investigation into Maria Ridulph's murder moved with surprising speed, considering the case was over 50 years old. Investigators began by thoroughly examining John Tessier's background and his whereabouts on December 3, 1957. What they discovered was both compelling and troubling. At the time of Maria's disappearance, 18-year-old John Tessier had what appeared to be a solid alibi. According to the original investigation, he had traveled by train to Rockford, Illinois that very evening to enlist in the Air Force. Military recruitment officers had verified that they spoke with Tessier around 7:15 p.m., right around the time Maria was being abducted in Sycamore. Additionally, phone records showed that someone named John Tessier had made a collect call to his parents from Rockford at 6:57 p.m. However, when investigators looked more closely at this alibi in 2008, cracks began to appear. The timeline seemed too convenient, and some details didn't quite add up. The investigation took a crucial turn when Illinois State Police contacted McCullough's former girlfriend from 1957, initially just asking for a photograph of him from that time period. What happened next was one of those moments that cold case investigators dream about. The former girlfriend called police back with information that would prove devastating to McCullough's alibi. While looking for the requested photograph, she had discovered something she had kept for over 50 years, an unused train ticket from December 1957. The ticket was made out to John Tessier and was for travel to Rockford on the very day Maria disappeared. This discovery was explosive. If Tessier had an unused train ticket, it meant he hadn't actually traveled to Rockford by train, as his alibi claimed. But how then had he gotten to Rockford to speak with recruitment officers and make that phone call? Investigators began to suspect that Tessier might have driven to Rockford after abducting Maria, giving him time to commit the crime before establishing his alibi. The investigation gained momentum when detectives located Kathy Chapman, the now adult woman who had been 8-year-old Kathy Sigmund in 1957. Chapman had lived with the memory of that December evening for over 50 years, and when investigators showed her a photograph of teenage John Tessier, her identification was immediate and certain. She positively identified him as Johnnie, the friendly stranger who had offered Maria a piggyback ride. Further investigation revealed disturbing patterns in McCullough's behavior. His half-sisters testified that, as a teenager, he had shown an inappropriate interest in young girls. Former acquaintances came forward with stories that painted a picture of someone who had exhibited concerning behavior around children. The case against McCullough was largely circumstantial. There was no physical evidence linking him to Maria's murder after so many decades. However, the combination of the collapsed alibi, the positive identification by the eyewitness, and the testimony about his character and behavior created a compelling case. In September 2011, more than 53 years after Maria's murder, Jack Daniel McCullough was arrested at his home in Seattle. He was extradited to Illinois to face charges for the kidnapping and murder of Maria Ridulph. The arrest made national news, not just because of the heinous nature of the crime, but because of the extraordinary length of time between the murder and the arrest. McCullough maintained his innocence throughout the legal proceedings, but prosecutors were confident they had finally identified Maria's killer. On September 14, 2012, after a trial that captivated the nation and brought decades-old memories back into sharp focus, Jack Daniel McCullough was convicted of the kidnapping and murder of Maria Ridulph. At 73 years old, he received a life sentence in prison, making this case officially the longest cold case to end with a conviction in United States history. The conviction was the result of careful detective work, the courage of family members who came forward with difficult truths, and the remarkable memory of a witness who never forgot the face of the man who took her best friend. Kathy Chapman's identification of McCullough as Johnnie proved to be the cornerstone of the prosecution's case, demonstrating the incredible power of eyewitness testimony even after 5 decades. The trial revealed the full scope of the investigation that had finally brought Maria's killer to justice. Prosecutors presented evidence of McCullough's collapsed alibi, the unused train ticket that contradicted his claimed whereabouts, and testimony from multiple witnesses about his inappropriate behavior around children. While no physical evidence linked him to the crime after so many years, the circumstantial evidence created a compelling narrative of guilt. For Maria's surviving family members, the conviction brought a mixture of relief and continued grief. After 55 years of wondering who had taken their little girl and why, they finally had answers. The trial allowed them to see justice served, even though it could never bring Maria back or erase the decades of pain her loss had caused. The case had profound impacts beyond Maria's immediate family. It demonstrated the importance of never giving up on cold cases, showing that even decades-old crimes could still be solved with persistence, new technology, and the willingness of witnesses to come forward. The investigation proved that evidence preserved for decades could still yield results when examined with fresh perspectives and modern techniques. The conviction also highlighted the crucial role that family members can play in solving cold cases. Without Janet Tessier's courage in coming forward with her mother's deathbed confession, McCullough might never have been identified as a suspect. Her decision to contact authorities, despite the personal cost and family implications, was instrumental in finally achieving justice for Maria. The case became a model for cold case investigations across the country, showing how persistence, community cooperation, and advances in investigative techniques could combine to solve even the most challenging cases. It proved that the passage of time, while it might fade memories and destroy physical evidence, could also create opportunities as new witnesses came forward and new technologies became available. McCullough's conviction closed a chapter that had remained open for over half a century, but it also served as a reminder that some crimes leave wounds that never fully heal, affecting not just immediate families but entire communities for generations. The story of Maria Ridulph reminds us that justice doesn't operate on our timeline. Sometimes it takes decades, but it can still arrive. This case proves that no crime is ever truly forgotten, no victim ever truly abandoned, as long as there are people willing to keep searching for the truth. Think about the remarkable chain of events that led to McCullough's conviction. A mother's deathbed confession, preserved in the memories of daughters who struggled with the weight of that knowledge for 14 years. A girlfriend who kept a train ticket for over 50 years, not knowing it would become crucial evidence. A witness who never forgot a face, even after 5 decades had passed. Each element was essential, and without any one of them, Maria's killer might have escaped justice forever. This case also illustrates how our understanding of crimes can evolve over time. The alibi that seemed ironclad in 1957 crumbled under modern scrutiny. Evidence that was overlooked or misunderstood decades ago took on new significance when examined by fresh investigators with advanced techniques and different perspectives. Perhaps most importantly, Maria's story shows us the power of persistence and community. The investigators who reopened this case in 2008 could have easily decided that, after 50 years, there was no point in trying. Instead, they chose to believe that Maria deserved justice, no matter how long it took to achieve it. The conviction of Jack Daniel McCullough didn't bring Maria back, but it ensured that her life mattered, that her death wasn't forgotten, and that the person responsible finally faced consequences for his actions. It gave her family the answers they had waited a lifetime to receive, and demonstrated that even the coldest cases can eventually be solved. Maria Ridulph was 7 years old when her life was cut short on a snowy December evening in 1957. She deserved to grow up, to have her own family, to live a full life. While justice came too late to save her, it arrived in time to honor her memory and ensure that her killer could never hurt another child. If this case moved you, please like this video and subscribe for more investigative stories. Share your thoughts in the comments below about how communities can support cold case investigations and keep victims' memories alive.